quick video. Sorry, I have to crouch down over here to help you guys out as you're learning just the brain anatomy. So I have a brain right here, and let's just break this down real fast. So I'm sorry, I have my phone down here, so I'm going to pull up to make sure I'm not forgetting any structures. So overall, we have the cerebral cortex here. It's divided into two hemispheres, the left and right. Remember, when we're looking at a brain or any anatomical feature, we have to think about it in terms of the patient's perspective. So this would be the patient's head like this. This is the anterior, the posterior view. So this would be the left hemisphere. This would be the right hemisphere. So if you look, there are all of these ridges over here, and those are called gyri. And then, which is the plural form. Then you have the valleys here, which are called sulci. So dividing the two hemispheres right down the middle is the longitudinal fissure. What separates the two hemispheres is a bundle of myelin and axons, which help relay signals between the two hemispheres, and that's known as the corpus callosum. So if you open up the brain here, you'll see that this is the corpus callosum along here. There's another brain I have here. You can see here, this is also the corpus callosum. So it's myelinated, a bundle of myelinated neurons. So next, on this brain, we see the thalamus here. So this whole structure here. So the thalamus is the relay center of the brain. So hypo means below, so if you look down here, you'll see that this area, this region, is the hypothalamus, and it's pretty much involved in a lot of different functions, but primarily autonomic functions, which you can think of as automatic. So like when we have that feeling to fight or to flee the scene, kind of those automatic responses. It's also involved in working with the pituitary gland, which is right down here, to secrete hormones to the rest of our body. Yeah. Let's see, what's next? So here we have the midbrain. The midbrain, there's different parts of it, but the midbrain has like the tegmentum and the tectum, and that is involved in basically auditory and visual relay. Auditory and visual, like it helps relay those messages. Here is the pons, which connects the midbrain to the medulla down here. So this is the medulla. The full name is medulla oblongata, and it's involved in a lot of just different basic functions like heart rate and breathing and things of that nature. Okay. So this is basically the pons, the cerebellum, and the medulla are all collectively known as the hindbrain. So you have the pons here, the cerebellum, which is also known as the little brain. You can also see the cerebellum here. There it is. It kind of looks like you see like these branch structures which kind of look like little trees, so that's known as the arbor vitae, which in Latin means tree of life. The folds of the cerebellum, just like how you have folds of the outer surfaces of the brain, the folds of the cerebellum are known as folia. So there's also a ventricle system within the brain, and that's involved in distributing cerebral spinal fluid to the brain, which nourishes the brain and bathes the brain. So there's different ventricle systems. So if you look at this brain, you have the lateral ventricle up here. So the lateral ventricles include ventricles 1 and 2. You have the third ventricle around here. You have the cerebral aqueduct, which is a connecting point. And then you have the fourth ventricle here, which is posterior to the midbrain and the pons. And you have the choroid plexus, which is this structure here. Let me see if I can find it here. So the choroid plexus would be somewhere right here. Sorry. Right along here. So there's pinkish structure, and that's involved in actually making the cerebral spinal fluid. So moving along. So I think we covered all of the main structures there. What's important to know also with the brain is that you have something called meninges, which are the protective outer coating of the brain. So the lowest layer is the pia mater, then you have the arachnoid matter, and then you have the dura mater, which is the hardest casing on the outside. And I wanted to go over some skull anatomy to help you guys out. So I'm just gonna, I'm in the lab right now, and I have a skull here with me, and I'm just gonna go through the different structures. I have my phone pulled up here so I don't forget anything. Yeah, so let's go through the cranium and the facial bones. So the most superior bone here, so this is all the frontal bone, right? This is the parietal bone. This is the occipital bone. This is the temporal bone. And maybe if it's easier for you to remember, we have the different lobes of the brain, and they correspond to those 4 different sections of the skull. So here we have, right up here, we have the nasal bone, so you can even feel that right up here. We have the maxilla, which is, which is the upper jaw. So this is, it's hard to point. This is all the maxilla, all of this. Then we have our cheekbone, which is this right here. So that's called the zygomatic bone. So if we look into the orbit, and remember the orbit is right here, our eye socket, the most anterior bone that we need to be aware of is the lacrimal bone. So let's see if I can get a good angle here. So this would be the lacrimal bone right here, all along here. And if this helps you remember, there's a little groove in here, so it's kind of hard to see, but there's a groove right down there, and that's called the lacrimal groove, and that's where the lacrimal gland is, where our tear duct is. So right posterior to the lacrimal gland, you have the ethmoid bone. The lacrimal bone, you have the ethmoid bone. Maybe if I bring it closer, you can see a little more. So do you see how there's like that little fissure? But like right behind here, that's the ethmoid bone, and it forms the superior structure here of our nose. So this is also, this is really hard. This is also the ethmoid bone right in the middle up here. And then the other bone is this is the sphenoid bone. So this is it's like all back here. This is all the sphenoid bone. It's the and it actually even, you can see some of it back here. This would be part of the sphenoid bone here. So back to the nose here. So remember we said this is the ethmoid bone, and right below here, this would be the vomer. And collectively, this is known as the septum. So if you were to get a septum piercing, that's the general area. And these are known, if you see these bumps, like on the sides here, 1, 2, 1, 2, that's called the inferior nasal concha. The lower jaw is the mandible. Remember, this is the maxilla, and this is the mandible. If you look on the skull here, right there, that hole here, that's known as the external auditory meatus, or the external acoustic meatus. Behind our ear, right here, this process is the mastoid process. So you can even feel it. Then we have, if you turn the skull down here, You have the occipital condyles. Oop, sorry, I'm not doing a good job pointing. Occipital condyles, right here and here. You have the palatine bone up here. Okay, so then if we turn around, remember this is the occipital bone. It's a little tricky to see, but you have these different lines. So if you can orient yourself by first feeling the bump on your skull, and remember that's the external occipital protuberance, so right here, this bump, and then kind of like close by you'll see these, it's kind of like it curves right here, and it curves right here. So that's known as the superior nuchal line. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And then right below there's another, like, it's very faint. There's another two lines that curve, so that's known as the inferior nuchal line. Oh yeah, so then other important structures is if you open up the skull, I always have a hard time doing this. Okay, there we go. And we turn it like this, so this is the head. We go like this. Remember, this would be anterior up front, this would be posterior behind, and this would be in the middle. So it's pretty simple. This is known as the anterior cranial fossa up top here, and remember a fossa is kind of like a valley. Then you have the middle cranial fossa, then you have the posterior cranial fossa. Should have done this before I took the brain apart, but we have what are known as sutures. So there's a suture here. Let's see, do you see this suture right there? This is really hard. This suture right here, so that's known as the coronal suture. If you follow that back along the head like this, that's known as the sagittal suture. On the side, you have the squamous suture. Sorry. Then here, this. That's called the lambdoid suture. I think I covered everything. Hopefully that was helpful. Cool. Let me know if you have any questions.